you could argue that the likes of Berhalter, Tessman, and your friend Roldan have been more productive and more, I guess, in that sense, valuable than Johnny Cardoso. Christian Pulisic, he has not become the player that a lot of people envisioned. David, I think you are the most amazing colleague that I have ever worked with. I am incredibly fortunate to work with you. Fuera! Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi Lalas, and welcome to the State of the Union Show, presented by Zillow. Someday starts today. This is where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This show will be talking romantic champions, sensitive Pulisic, American youth soccer, FIFA yellow cards, mouth covering, Mora's Mexican confidence, Apex, and so much more. But first, join me as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, Aidan Morris, a soccer savant and a Fox soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how you doing on this Wednesday, April 29th in the year 2026?
I'm doing well. Fun day for us, the pod, and then a little CONCACAF Champions Cup action right after.
Yes, and as we mentioned earlier in the week, I will be hosting tonight with my good friends Warren Barton and Maurice Sadu, so we'll look forward to that. And the words that you hear coming out of my mouth are going to be written and have been written by none other than David Mosse. So I thank you for that in terms of making me at least sound like I know what I'm talking about there. Shall we light this candle, my friend?
Let's do it.
Where shall we start?
The UEFA Champions League semis are off and running. We'll take them in order. On Tuesday, holders PSG claimed a 5-4 first leg win over Bayern Munich at the Parc des Princes. You heard that right. It was 5-4 for PSG. Kvaratskhelia and Dembele each scored twice. João Neves got the other. For Bayern, it was Harry Kane, Michael Olise, Upamecano, and Luis Diaz. Most neutrals were enthralled and considered this an all-time great match, but there were some dissenters who decried the openness of it, the lack of defending, and said it wasn't proper football. Where did you come down on all that?
So I watching this game, I was struck by the reaction to it. And I think it's, a expected reaction to the pendulum of the way that the game has played or is played nowadays. I don't want to grumpy old man it, as I saw some do, in that in no way, shape, or form was my first thought, oh, that's not soccer, or that's not the way the game should be played. But I do want to make a very, very clear. The reason why this game is being held up as a romantic notion of the way the game is played is relative to goals. If this game had been 0-0, but all the same chances had happened, and I don't know, it hit the post or there was a save or something like that, nobody would look at it the same. And I say that because when, historically, especially when it comes to an American sports fan base out there, when they decry the fact that, this is a game that doesn't have a lot of goals, and why aren't there more goals? Goals resonate. Goals matter. More goals are better. And yes, this game had quality goals and back and forth goals. So, the theater and the drama, that's obvious to everyone that was watching. But I go back to the fact that in a game like soccer that is so traditionally low scoring, when you have a game like this, it is relative to the amount of goals that were scored, and specifically to the fact that the ball is going in the back of the net, and that can shade everything in a positive way. I have no problem. You enjoyed it, but understand why you're enjoying it, and it's because of the goals.
The only time that it got a little bit goofy for me is when PSG go up 5-2 mid-second half. I thought the way they let Bayern back into the game, those goals that took it from 5-2 to 5-4 were kind of soft. Now, Bayern were good value overall for that result. They created so many chances throughout that they did not deserve to have a lopsided defeat in that game. But man, when you're PSG, you're up 3 goals in the second half at home. You got to be able to manage that situation better. That's where it got a bit farcical to me.
No, the whole point is that, no, you shouldn't manage that situation. I mean, I think that's what a lot of people are saying, is that you're giving these teams credit because especially, I mean, not just teams, like these are elite teams that, to your point, individually and collectively should understand how to, quote unquote, manage the situations that they put themselves in. In this moment, they said, no, we're not going to manage it in the traditional way. And we're just going to go back and forth. We probably have at times have seen this when it comes to other sports, and certainly, boxing, for example. I'm sure there are boxing matches that have happened where it's just a slugfest and there was no rhyme or reason. And I'm sure there was a romantic notion of, oh, they're just letting it go. And they're just, just two guys hitting the crap out of each other. And they're not playing coy, and they're not playing possum, and they're not defending, and they're not, to your point, managing the situation. But that's what people want to see. But I go back to my point. They want to see it because there are goals involved. Because that same romantic notion and style of play could have happened, and if there weren't any goals, we wouldn't be talking about this game.
We've talked about great players in the history of this game that didn't get to play at a World Cup because of the country they were born in. Everybody from George Best to George Weah. There was a lot of talk about Erling Haaland in that vein, but he did finally make a World Cup. Kvaratskhelia, man, what a player he is. It's such a shame. And I have a lot of time for Georgia because we spent the summer of 2018 in Russia, and I fell in love with Georgian food. But obviously the soccer
right.
is
the dumpling. What's the dumpling?
They have the appetizer khachapuri, which is to die for. I found a restaurant in New York City, Old Tbilisi Garden. John Strong and Stu Holden love it as well, which is terrific. But we know as a soccer nation, they're not all that great. And so Kvaratskhelia, who knows if we're ever going to get to see him at a World Cup?
Yeah, we keep expanding. You never know. At some point, they'll be able to qualify.
We did get to watch him at the Euros a couple years ago, which was
right.
fun.
All right. So to take away the romantic part of this, certainly not the worst result when it comes to Bayern Munich, especially with no away goals and all that kind of stuff. So they can, they can come back and they can certainly clean this up. Ultimately, who goes through now after having seen this and the way that they played and obviously the score?
It's completely wide open. I guess I slightly lean Bayern.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree?
Yeah, I think I think these are the two best teams in this Final Four. But let's move on and talk about the other one.
Well, your buddy Piers Morgan disagrees. He said the attritional Arteta would be able to grind out a result against either one of these clubs, PSG or Bayern, but Arsenal obviously have to get there first. Today, they played away to Atletico Madrid. It finished 1-1, both goals from the penalty spot. Gyökeres late in the first half, Julian Alvarez early in the second half. Arsenal thought they had another penalty late when Henko stepped on Eze, but it got overturned on a VAR review. We'll get to that in a minute, but I don't want to bury the lead from an American point of view. Johnny Cardoso started for Atletico. That's rarefied air, an American starting in a Champions League semifinal. Pulisic did it for Chelsea against Real Madrid in 21. DeMarcus Beasley did it for PSV against AC Milan back in 2005. Tyler Adams came on as a sub for Leipzig against PSG in 20. So a tremendous honor for Johnny, which has a certain type of U.S. fan looking at that and saying, how could this guy possibly not start at the World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, I was interested to see the response to him starting and playing, especially as we get closer and closer to this World Cup. And we've talked about Johnny over the years, and he is not a shoo-in to make the 2026 World Cup team under Mauricio Pochettino and the 26-man roster. I think he is going to be there. For a number of different reasons, not the least of which is that I do think he is extremely talented. But let's also be honest. We're watching him play here in the Champions League semifinal, and our minds, understandably, say, well, then he obviously has to be on the U.S. Men's national team this summer for the World Cup, and obviously, because of where he plays, he should start, right? But oftentimes, over the years, as we have seen Johnny with the U.S. men's national team, his play hasn't lived up to what his club pedigree confers. And I will say this too. You could argue that the likes of Berhalter and Tessman and your friend Roldan have been more productive and more, I guess, in that sense, valuable to Mauricio Pochettino and to this U.S. men's national team than Johnny Cardoso. But ultimately, all that matters is what you do this summer. We've said time and time again that a national team It's not about the best players, it's about the best collection of players. Because I saw some people, when I said this, making the argument that he's too good for the U.S. men's national team because when he's playing at Atletico Madrid, he's playing with some really, really good players, world-class players around him. That may be the case, all right? And I can completely understand that argument, but it doesn't matter. Great players are able to adjust to the level that they find themselves in. Could be a higher level, could be a lower level, right? And the circumstances that they find themselves in. And if that is the case, he has yet to be able to adjust. Now, you could put it on Pochettino and say, well, you got to put him in a position to succeed and all that kind of stuff. But again, we're 40 whatever days away from the World Cup. So you're going to have to adjust. And as I said before, there are plenty of players that we could talk about that play with some very, very good players around them and at the quote-unquote highest level from a club perspective. And when they get to the national team, it is a step down. And the good ones are able to adjust. And so Johnny is going to have to adjust, if that is ultimately the case. I can make a case that it's not necessarily true, but if it is, he better figure out. Either way, from an American perspective, it's wonderful to see. I thought he had a fine game, didn't make any mistakes. He's a very simple player, and that sometimes is the hardest thing to do. He got substituted out, I don't know, in the
88th minute.
88th minute. And it's a good thing. It's a feather in his cap. It's also a feather in American soccer's cap to see somebody that we can say, hey, that's one of ours there, playing at the highest level when it comes to the club.
Pulisic is the only American to play in a Champions League final. He did so for Chelsea against Manchester City in 21. Our pal Jovan Karofsky won a Champions League title with Dortmund in 97, but he did not feature in that final against Juventus. If Atletico can get a result at the Emirates next week, and then they would face either PSG or Bayern in Budapest. If Johnny steps on the field that day, he would become the second alongside Pulisic. Let's talk about the officiating. We know how the English are with handball, so they were already salty about the Atletico penalty, that Ben Rice handball in the box. I didn't have an issue with that call, but I do think Arsenal fans have a gripe with the late penalty that was overturned. That to me looked like a foul, Henko stepping on Eze, and the fact that it was a penalty on the field, to me, it was strange to then overturn it on review.
I think what the referee crew, and certainly the center referee, was trying to determine was you do have a right to territory in terms of placing a foot in territory. You don't have a right to, in doing so, impede a player. But I think the distinction is, did he step on the player's foot or didn't he? And I think they determined that, if they did, he grazed it. So you thought that, because there were 3 penalties called today, 2 of them were held up and converted, and then this one was looked at by VAR. And you thought that this one was not enough to overturn it, which
Correct.
happened.
And Henko, by the way, breathing a sigh of relief because he's the guy that took down Gyökeres for the first penalty, so he would have been the villain. But by the way, I know this game was in Spain, but the degree to which Atletico was on the front foot and Arsenal was defending, it is amazing. Listen, if Arsenal come away from this season with major trophies, nobody's going to complain how they did it. But Arteta has so deviated from what he was supposed to be once upon a time. This is a classy Spanish midfielder who played under Arsene Wenger, who was an assistant at Man City under Pep. And it's amazing how pragmatic they've become down the stretch.
Well, when your future and your job depends on it, pragmatism is the easiest route to go. And maybe that's why yesterday it was such for a lot of people, a breath of fresh air, because, both these teams and therefore both these managers, and it's not a dirty little secret. We credit the managers. I think the game dictated yesterday what happened. It was going to be back and forth. Nobody was going to change it. Managers can scream and yell from the sideline. They can say whatever they want at halftime, but that's what the soccer gods deemed appropriate for this game. And they had the talent, obviously, on the field to be able to do that. But I mean, I don't think it should come as anybody's surprise that even a guy like Arteta is not as romantic in the most important moments as you would think.
Arsenal also fighting for the Premier League crown at the weekend. They host Fulham. City are away to Everton on Monday, which is a tricky game. So this could be a good weekend for Arsenal in that race.
And we've talked about how it's not just the wins, but also the goals that you score. And, Arsenal could pop a few against Fulham. But, they're both waiting for the other to trip up at some point. I think we both agree that there are still some surprises to come, and somebody is going to drop points at some point.
So on Wednesday, we had an American Johnny Cardoso feature in a Champions League semifinal. On Thursday, we're likely going to have an American Chris Richards feature in the Conference League semis. Crystal Palace are away to Shakhtar Donetsk. I say away, but this match is actually in Krakow because, as we know, Shakhtar don't play at home anymore. They haven't in years. I'll let you go on Chris Richards first, but then I'm going to do a major geek out on this match talking about Shakhtar. Thoughts on Chris Richards trying to win a European trophy here with Crystal Palace?
Well, I mean, we just talked about how the pride that we feel when one of our own is featured in something that is kind of universally recognized as an elite level. And we also take pride as not just fans, but as players of that moment when you're able to raise trophies, when you're able to hoist silverware. It's the money shot. It's what you want. It's what lasts. And you don't get a whole lot of opportunities. Some players never get those opportunities. And I recognize that there are different levels, but for someone like Chris Richards, who is still relatively young and still building his resume, this would be, again, another nice feather in the cap. He's still got a ways to go. I think we all recognize that Chris Richards is in pen right now, and we need to knock on wood because I think he's going to be very, very important this summer. I also think in this conversation about the brands and, Weston McKennie and Christian Pulisic, all that stuff, I also think that Chris Richards has a real potential of breaking out with, his attitude, his smile, his look, everything, and the fact that he's just a damn good player.
All right. I apologize to Sean and Tripp for this, but I want to get this in because I love this guy. Earlier this month, legendary Romanian manager Mircea Lucescu passed away. And if you don't know the story, Lucescu captained Romania at the 1970 World Cup, played against Brazil, swapped jerseys with Pele at the final whistle, and developed a love affair with Brazilian football. He decided then and there, if I ever become a manager, I'm going to sign as many Brazilians as possible. And lo and behold, he became the Shakhtar manager in 2004. And he was the one that created this incredible Brazil to Shakhtar pipeline. There have been a couple of Brazilians there before him, but he really turbocharged it. And it was a mixture of guys that stayed at Shakhtar for a long time and others that use it as a stepping stone, like Willian and Fernandinho and Douglas Costa. But we at Fox covered the Europa League and the Champions League. We did many Shakhtar games, and you guys would look at the squad and notice that over half the players are Brazilian, like 7 or 8 of the 11 starters. I read somewhere that Lucescu would speak Portuguese in training. They would have a translator for the Ukrainians. And then what happened was Russia invaded Ukraine in early 22. The Ukrainian league shut down. FIFA determined that all foreign players in Ukraine, their contracts were voided. They could leave for free. All the Brazilians left. And I remember thinking, is this how this story is going to end? And what a sad way for it to end. But actually, once the Ukrainian league started up again, Shakhtar went back to signing Brazilians. A bunch of Brazilians have gone there the last couple of years. They're leading the Ukrainian Premier League. Here they are in the semifinals of a European competition. And if you look at the squad, half the players are Brazilian. So it's kind of starting up again.
Oh, first off, I love the information and I love this story. So you certainly don't have to apologize to anybody for deviating and getting that in. So we'll look forward to see what Shakhtar has in store. Both in terms of the Brazilians, but also in terms of playing against Crystal Palace, right?
The other semifinal in the Conference League, Rayo Vallecano against Strasbourg, and then the Europa League semis also get underway on Thursday. There is an all-English matchup, Nottingham Forest against Aston Villa, and then the other semi is Braga against Freiburg. The interesting thing about Aston Villa, Nottingham Forest, as we know, Unai Emery is the great Europa League whisperer. He's won it a bunch of times, but Nottingham Forest are 16th in the Premier League. They're not out of the woods in terms of relegation yet, but if they were to win the Europa League, they would qualify for the Champions League. You could theoretically have a team in the English Championship next season and the Champions League.
Yeah, we've talked about this potential to have happen. It's a back door, but it's not necessarily a back door to staying up, but it's certainly a back door to a place that I'm not sure you ever thought you were going to be.
Villa are 5th in the Premier League, which is a confirmed Champions League spot, and there's a big gap between 5th and 6th, so not much drama there. We know pretty much right now the teams that are going to qualify to the Champions League via their Premier League placement. Villa at the weekend will play host to Tottenham. Plenty of drama for Tottenham. They are in 18th right now, 2 points back of West Ham as they fight for their survival.
I mean, this is when people talk about promotion relegation, and oftentimes in the American soccer circles we do, and oftentimes the argument is made that there is no greater drama. And believe me, I've lived that drama. I understand exactly what you're talking about. But whatever drama it is, usually it's relative to yo-yo teams. Remember, we talked about that a little while ago. It's relative to smaller teams at the end of the season that are just desperate to hang on. Rarely are we talking about teams like Spurs. I mean, which just shows how far they have literally fallen in the standings and the desperation type of moment that they are in.
The big one in the Premier League this upcoming weekend, Manchester United will host Liverpool. That's third against fourth. I've mentioned this before. I read a great book a few years ago called Red on Red, co-written by these two English journalists, Jim White and Phil McNulty, about the history of this rivalry. They think it's the fiercest rivalry in world football. Now, Tripp wants you to say where you think United-Liverpool ranks on your favorite soccer rivalries list. If you knew his State of the Union podcast history, way back in like the Luis Aguilar days, we had you do a list of best derbies in the world, and you controversially put Seattle-Portland above Manchester United-Liverpool, one of the most embarrassing moments in the history of this podcast. Are you going to double down on that right now?
Yeah, I'll double down. Absolutely. I mean, we should power rank the most embarrassing moments in history on the pod. We could put together a hell of a list. All right, yeah. It's United-Liverpool, but yes, it transcends the situation, but does it? I mean, it's United-Liverpool.
Does this get your juices going as much as like Real Madrid, Barcelona?
No.
Nowhere near.
Well, because of where we are and where United is, where Liverpool is, and it's just circumstantial too for me. I know that there's times where we throw out the record books because this is so important and this is so historic. But it's also relative to what is happening with the different teams and what are they fighting for, and do they need these 3 points? Do they not need these 3 points? So I mean, I'll watch it, but I'm not caring in the way that maybe I have in the past.
Milan Inter versus Manchester United Liverpool.
Milan Inter versus Manchester United Liverpool. Well, one is one city, okay, and
same stadium, even.
Right? Yeah. So
probably Juve Inter would be more analogous.
Yeah, I mean,
Il Derby d'Italia.
Yeah. I'd still probably go with United Liverpool.
Oh, there you go.
I'll give them a little bit of love. Maybe over the years, I've changed my tune when it comes to that.
Now, both Manchester United and Liverpool have American owners. We know the Glazers and Fenway Sports Group. The same true of Wrexham, of course, with Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds. The English Championship reaches its dramatic conclusion this upcoming weekend. Wrexham are in 6th place. They're level on points with Hull for the last promotion playoff spot, but they're ahead on goal difference. They're only 1 point above Derby County, who are in that mix as well. They will host 4th place Middlesbrough. Aidan Morris and company already assured of at least the playoff, but they're still fighting to get that second automatic spot alongside Haji Wright and Coventry. Middlesbrough in 4th, just 2 points back of 2nd place. Ipswich, Millwall in that mix as well. Millwall, by the way, are known as the thugs of English football.
Oh, I hadn't heard.
Which, of course, is why Tripp is pulling for them to get promoted.
Right. And Wrexham, it has to win this, right? Or doesn't have to win it, but they need this. They need this, right? So Middlesbrough could be a spoiler relative to the Wrexham story.
Well, Wrexham are in 6th right now, so I'd have to see who Hull is playing. But theoretically, they don't need to win. I mean, if Hull have an even worse result than them this weekend,
but Wrexham's not in.
As of now, they're in the promotion playoffs. They're not in.
They're not in.
Correct.
Okay. Got it. All right.
Let me see who Hull have. Hull are home to Norwich City.
All right.
So yeah, should be. We talked about the drama of promotion relegation, and we get it this weekend in the English Championship.
Yeah, and it will be documented in the Welcome to Wrexham. Wrexham Welcome, whatever it is called.
Welcome to Wrexham.
Yes,
yeah.
Welcome. Okay, I got it right. There we go.
We go to the Bundesliga next. Malik Tillman and Leverkusen are battling for a Champions League spot. They're in 6th place, 2 points out of 4th. They will play host to 3rd place Leipzig.
Do you think Malik Tillman's? He's played. At times he's started. At times he hasn't started. At times he's come in as a substitute. Do you think that his star has dimmed a little bit over this last season?
Yeah, he had a great start to the campaign, and then it's petered out. The overall numbers are still respectable. He's done okay,
Right.
but it
This
looked like at one point something bigger was happening
right.
here.
I mean, this isn't a Gio Reyna type of situation by any
No.
stretch of the imagination. Okay.
Speaking of,
Oh, really?
also in the Bundesliga this upcoming weekend, Gladbach will host Dortmund. The interesting thing there is, as we told you last weekend, 16-year-old Matisse Albert came on for Dortmund, becoming the youngest American ever to feature in the Bundesliga, breaking a record that Gio had set in his Dortmund days. Gio, as we know now, at Gladbach, so the two could potentially go head-to-head this weekend, provided they both step on the field.
I mean, at some point, I guess the last young phenom to really hit was, I don't know, I guess it would be Christian Pulisic. I mean, we our history is littered with young Americans that have shot to not necessarily stardom, but at least um, acknowledgement and recognition, because they stepped on the field, and we get very, very excited. It's completely understandable. I'm sure other countries and cultures do the same thing because we extrapolate it out and we think, oh my goodness, this player is going to take us to the promised land. But what if we go back, obviously we can go back to Freddie Adu or anybody else, and it could be a number of different reasons. They just didn't continue down that pathway developmentally the way that we thought. Injuries, obviously, circumstantial. Where they went to play. Could be off the field stuff, a million different things. But it's not going to stop us still from getting excited when a young American player does well. And I don't think that this is any different. But the fact that over the last couple of weeks, people have gotten excited about Mathis Albert, and this is a game that features Gio Reyna, who at one point was what we're talking about here, was the next big thing. You're not always the next big thing. So we'll see if either Gio Reyna finds a way back, or if Mathis Albert bucks the trend and does live up to the expectations. Not easy.
It's been a decade since Christian Pulisic made his professional debut with Dortmund. Now he's a grown adult. Surely nobody would be questioning his maturity anymore. Although, as we transition to Serie A next, and we're going to make this our home team update presented by Zillow. Someday starts today. AC Milan at the weekend are away to Sassuolo. Christian Pulisic, we know, 18 games without a goal for club and country this calendar year. Milan boss Max Allegri was asked about his struggles, and he had an interesting quote. He said, about Pulisic, he's a very sensitive guy. The fact that he doesn't score affects him more. He's a player who gets into tackles and struggles more. He suffers more from this. I have to try to give the team balance. Playing without a true center forward, he struggles more. What did you make of those comments?
Boy, with friends like these, who needs enemies? Wow. So, Max Allegri, I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt. And, maybe there is something that at times is lost in translation. But anytime you call someone sensitive, there is a negative connotation to it. What you're really saying is they are soft. And so at this point, I don't know how this helps Christian Pulisic other than a recognition of he's going through a moment right now. But the last thing in the world that you want to be called by a coach, and certainly someone that's making decisions relative to your future, is sensitive. I will say this: we have all discovered over the years that Christian Pulisic, well, as a soccer player, has certainly developed and matured into what I think ultimately is going to be considered the best male American soccer player in history. But he has not become the player that a lot of people envisioned. And it's not his fault. This is who he is. He cannot be something that he's not. He cannot be, the personality of, I don't know, a Weston McKennie, or we mentioned Chris Richards. That's just not who he is. While he does, I think, have a physical ability to put his body on the line, I also think that outside things can impact him, and maybe he takes them personally, and maybe he's more emotional than you would like from an athlete. But we've in the past, at times, to be quite honest, when we talked about Landon Donovan over the years, that's been sometimes one of the gripes or one of the strikes against Landon Donovan is that he thinks too much. He's too emotional at times, and I can understand that type of criticism, but as long as this assessment from Max Allegri, in Max Allegri's mind, is okay, and this is still a positive, this is just a recognition of how he sees this player, that's fine. But from a public perspective, it's just not the thing that you want to hear and not the thing that you want to see for a player that's going to be so crucial to this U.S. team come this summer, and now 43 days away from the World Cup. So, all right, Max, do your thing.
We know that Juve boss Luciano Spalletti has nothing but nice things to say about Weston McKennie, and this upcoming weekend, Juventus will host Verona.
Okay, 3 points. Take it. Put it in the bank.
Inter hosts Parma this weekend. Inter can clinch the Scudetto, possibly even before they take the field, depending on other results. And the interesting thing about that is if, assuming Inter win the Scudetto, Christian Pulisic, their manager, would become the first foreign manager to win Serie A since Jose Mourinho did it with Inter way back in 2010.
Really?
Even during this down period for Italian players, they've still been pumping out the managers, and Italian managers have still been dominating Serie A.
Interesting. So their success as a soccer playing nation maybe requires a flip where there's more Italian players but more foreign managers.
And they've even exported managers. You've had in the last 15 years, Roberto Mancini, Claudio Ranieri, Antonio Conte all win the Premier League. You've had Carlo Ancelotti do everything that he's done, and he's obviously now coaching Brazil at a World Cup. So it's funny how
it's a curious case, right, of the Azzurri, huh?
And this would actually be Inter's third Scudetto in 6 years, and it would be with different managers each time. Conte in 21, Simone Inzaghi in 24, and now Christian Pulisic in 26. So we'll see if they can seal the deal this upcoming
dynastic,
week.
Right? That's a dynasty, kind of.
3 and 6.
No. You're a big sports guy in a lot of that. What's the definition? Does it have to be?
I don't think that's good enough.
Not
3
good
and
enough.
6 to be a dynasty.
4, then you maybe been talking about
4 and
4 and
6.
6. Maybe you're okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
We transition to Major League Soccer. There's 3 games on our air on Saturday, live
3
on
games.
Fox.
Wow.
Inter Miami will host Orlando. That's second against 14th in the East.
Inter Miami and 2 ends of the spectrum, right?
Yep.
For a lot of these, for a bunch of these games here. So, Inter Miami, Orlando City. Well, interesting thing is when we first started MLS 30 something years ago or whatever, there was a lot of talk about rivalries and the importance of rivalries. And as the league has expanded, I know that Commissioner Garber and the owners, in terms of looking for partners and expansion partners and approving expansion partners, a lot of it is based on rivalry and at times manufactured rivalry. So this Florida type of derby is great, but let's be honest, right now it's Inter Miami that has soaked up most of the oxygen down there in Florida as it relates to professional soccer.
I can't wait for Antoine Griezmann to arrive, so we have a Messi-Griezmann duel when these two clubs meet, but we don't have that quite yet.
I hope some more people arrive with Antoine Griezmann.
Also on Fox on Saturday, Seattle will play host to Sporting KC. That's 4th against 15th in the West. SKC, the worst team in the league, just 4 points from 9 games.
And minus 18 goal differential or something ridiculous like that. It's horrible. And it's not going to change. You can rah-rah all you want. This is just not a good team at Sporting KC. So the World Cup break coming up, I don't know if that's going to change anything. The summer market, you're going to have to buy a lot of players, and that's not always easy. So I think, this is a situation where you just got to withstand the rest of the year, because I just don't see it changing. They're not going to go on a run, and I don't think that they're going to have their hands full just like anybody else would against Seattle this weekend.
And then I believe this is on FS1. Xavier Gozo, Diego Luna, and Real Salt Lake facing Portland.
We've talked so much about these young young players in Real Salt Lake. And, wow, I wonder what Diego Luna thinks of the Gozo talk right now. I don't think he necessarily feels threatened, but they're all human. They all read and see the things that are going on. And again, we've talked about dynamics and how delicate they can be within a team. They're playing well. They're playing well together. But I mean, I wouldn't. We talked about Gozo as a potential player on the World Cup team. I don't think that's the case. I don't even think Diego Luna even thinks of it like that.
So that's another crazy Stu Holden take.
It's not a crazy. Well, that's redundant, right? It's Stu Holden having a take, right?
Yep.
So most of them are crazy. I love you, Stu. You know that.
Nashville in first place in the East. This upcoming weekend, they're away to last place Philadelphia, but Nashville had a very disappointing Tuesday night in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. We were here covering that match. They suffered a first leg home defeat to Tigres. Angel Correa with the only goal. So Nashville now have it all to do in Mexico next weekend.
Yeah, Nashville really suffered from not having Sam Surridge.
Yep.
He wasn't even available, because they actually created a number of opportunities, especially out wide, some really good crosses, and it just wasn't happening, and they needed one of those to go in. Stu and I were talking about it after the game yesterday, and as great as Nashville's previous round was, and historic, going down to Mexico and winning down there, are you going to go back to the well again and believe that's going to happen? BJ Callahan, I think, recognizes his team has the capability, and obviously the proof is in the pudding. But are you going to bet on them doing it again, especially after losing at home? I mean, I know you love to talk about how much more positive and beneficial a 0-0 tie is in that first leg. Had they gotten that, maybe I'd be thinking a little bit differently right now, but it just didn't seem like they have enough for this very good Tigres team.
We've had MLS versus Liga MX in the final in each of the last 4 years of this competition. The semis are 2 MLS versus Liga MX, so we're wondering if we're going to have that again. Not looking great for Nashville, so the pressure now swings to LAFC. Tonight they will host Toluca. We're taping this on a Wednesday afternoon, so by the time you hear this pod, that game will have already been played. We can't say much about it, but anything you want to say that might not age well?
Well, as you mentioned, at the start of these semifinals, we had the potential for what people desire, which is Mexico versus the United States, Liga MX versus MLS. We had the potential for Mexico versus Mexico, which is traditionally what we have seen many, many times. And then we had this, amazing possibility of USA versus USA, MLS versus MLS. As you mentioned, with the Nashville score, that's looking further and further away as a possibility. LAFC, keep in mind, does not have Danny Bologna tonight. He is so important. We had an interesting conversation yesterday about Son and how good he has been or how good he hasn't been. And there's different ways of looking at it. Goal scoring, obviously you want him to score goals. He hasn't done a whole lot of that. I argue that he's been involved a whole lot more than people give him credit for, and that's ultimately a good thing. But he's going to have to shoulder a lot of the responsibility tonight. No, I think LAFC beats Toluca. There you go. There's your misguided prediction that when we get up tomorrow morning.
One fascinating subplot with these Liga MX sides, Mexico intends to have an extended training camp in preparation for the World Cup. On Tuesday, Javier Aguirre announced a squad of domestic-based players that are going to the World Cup. And based on when the date of that training camp starts, now Tigres didn't have anybody called up, so it doesn't affect them, but there were 2 Toluca players, Alexis Vega and Jesus Gallardo, in that Aguirre squad. And they would theoretically miss the second leg of this series and the League MX playoffs. I mean, they're actually going to pull players off the League MX playoff teams to go do a training camp ahead of the World Cup. It's very bizarre. We've been talking about this with John Strong the last couple days. We're trying to make sense of it. We're wondering if the clubs are really going to accept this and go along with it, or if there's still going to be a battle here.
Yeah, I don't know how you say camp cupcake in Spanish, but that's basically what they're kind of doing here. And they're shooting themselves in the foot from a club perspective for it's not an international window. They're just having a camp. And look, if you're Aguirre, you want to have as many of your players as possible ahead of this World Cup. not just a World Cup, but a home World Cup. So I get that, but it would really be a shame if some of those players aren't involved in the second leg, like you mentioned, or the playoffs when it comes to Liga MX. And I don't know how this has been agreed to. And to your point, the players that are called in, evidently, are now, well, a section of them have been informed that they are on the team, the roster, the 26-man roster for the World Cup.
Yeah.
And then there's this other group of players that are, I guess, ostensibly for the future.
Yeah, just to round out the numbers so they have a full squad to work with.
It just seems
everything about it is
all
bizarre.
seems very, very strange, except, this is Mexican soccer. Is it that strange?
Now, one player in the squad that Aguirre announced, of course, is 17-year-old Gilberto Moro, who plays for Tijuana. He is the big emerging star in Mexican soccer. He had a quote that you liked. He came out and said, "We think we're absolutely capable of winning the World Cup." In fact, he said we should be considered one of the favorites. And I know you love that brashness from the young man.
Love that brashness, youthful exuberance. I don't think that it is tongue-in-cheek. I think he truly believes this. And maybe, young players and out of the mouths of babes is where the truth and the motivation comes. He did couch it in that being a home World Cup, that there was something magical about this, and to be able to harness that. And we've talked about that many times. You can see here, we are favorites to win the World Cup. We are playing at home. And that's a good thing. As I said before, because he's now said this multiple times. So I hope he's a true believer and he's not just being told to say this. But I also think about, some of these players that we were talking about that are getting called up, some of the older players that have been around. Are they saying, "Hey, young pup, easy. we got to manage expectations." But if you're ever going to do something that people don't believe that you can do, it's always going to be looked at, the things that you say and the goals that you set out for yourself, as, I guess, ridiculous, for lack of a better word. But I love it. And so I hope he is, he's going to be on the team, but I hope he plays. I hope he stars. I hope he uses this World Cup to introduce himself to the world, both as a player and in terms of the leadership and, I guess, the romantic that he is, that anything can possibly happen. I would never, ever want to dampen the spirit of somebody who believes that they can do things that others believe are impossible.
That is it.
All right, let's take a quick break, come back, and it's time for Ask Alexi. All right, welcome back. It's time for Ask Alexi, that part of the show where you send in your comments, questions, and concerns. Keep in mind that our handle out there on all the old social media platforms is SOTU with Alexi. You can use that hashtag AskAlexi, or you can call into our State of the Union podcast hotline, which is 657-549-2297, 657-549-2297. Mosse, what do the folks want to know today?
First up on X, James Caron says, "I notice an uptick in former natties saying youth soccer sucks in the U.S. A lot of complaints, but a little light on solutions."
So with the World Cup just a mere weeks away, and, well, the evergreen notion that the U.S. men's national team is seen as a proxy for growth, I think it is absolutely expected and natural to see much more talk on the state of youth soccer, and not just by people that talk about soccer, but by everyone, and a self-examination of where we are and, how far we have come or not come. To your point, it is easy in a lot of things in life, and including this, what we're talking about here, it is easy to point out problems, but rarely have I seen solutions, let alone realistic solutions, that are offered. What I do object to as we are having this conversation, it's not the conversation. I think it's absolutely fair and right and healthy to have this conversation. But what I do object to is if and when we are vilifying those that are in the youth soccer space out there. And I've talked a lot about this. I just don't think it's fair, and I don't think it's right. And I think you're putting blame on people that don't deserve it. These are people that obviously provide a valued product to the customer out there, and I hope they make as much money as they possibly can. When it comes to what people like myself and others out there are saying. I've heard whether it's a Landon Donovan, whether it's a Tim Howard, whether it's a Eric Winalda, whether it's a Tab Ramos, talking about this. And it's easy to say, oh, youth soccer sucks, and it's a completely dysfunctional landscape, and it's a complete disaster. All right, well, first off, we can argue about that, but you're not telling me anything in that you're not giving me any solutions. And if you're giving me a solution as to, well, we can't have pay to play, again, that does absolutely nothing. I would love nothing more than every man, woman, and child that wants to play soccer be able to play it for free. But like a lot of things in life, who is going to pay for all this free stuff? In this case, it would be soccer. Who's going to pay for that? All right? It all costs money. And so where is that money going to come from? Oh, we're not coaching in the right way. We don't have the right philosophy, and it shouldn't be about scoring goals, or it shouldn't be about the score. Okay, all right, listen. Everybody's going to do it differently. And part of the reason why I think we struggle, part of the reason why we have challenges is specific to America. And I've talked about this before, about all the different ways that we think about soccer. And that seeps into the ways in which we coach soccer and which we develop players. But that is part of who we are as a country. So it's going to happen. You're already seeing it, and it's only going to ramp up as we get through this summer, because a lot of people are going to come into the soccer tent, and that's wonderful, and we need to welcome them in with open arms, and they're going to question, and they're going to say, well, why aren't we better? Our women's team has won a bunch of World Cups. Why haven't we done that? Well, it's apples to oranges in terms of the comparison. Well, we have 350 million people. Why can't we be better? Okay, well, you don't think that we've thought about this? You don't think that we have discussed this? Have we cracked the code yet? No, because you know why? It's really, really difficult. And we are going to have to explain time and time again, and I will be asked the question on every interview that I do, when are we going to win a World Cup? And what's the problem with American soccer? And why are people paying so much for soccer and all these different things? And, these are questions that don't have simple answers. I know I live in the world of clipping off things and hot takes and retweets and all this kind of stuff. I get it, but I'm also not naive in that there are men and women that every single day wake up and try to solve this complex problem, and it's not easy. And we have generations now after generations that have tried to move it forward. And to be fair to the men and women, they have moved it forward. And it is night and day. Is it where we need to be? No. Is it as far as we would have liked to have moved it? No. But to just come on and say American soccer is a disaster and American youth soccer doesn't know what they're doing, that's easy. Anybody can do that. What else we got, Mosse?
We have a voicemail. Let's take a listen.
What's up, guys? This is Patrick from Jacksonville, Florida. My question for you guys is, regardless of the group play, let's get through the first three matches to the fourth and fifth matches to win that fifth match and get to that sixth match, which we all know is that coveted quarterfinal. What do you think is our Achilles heel that would potentially keep us from beating in? It looks like on some of the predictions, it could be Argentina, it could be Belgium, depending on how we finish after we win the group, of course. But what do you think our Achilles heel is? Who needs to step to the occasion, right? We know the generic answers. Oh, it's Pulisic. Oh, it's McKinney. But what do you think? Let's dive deeper. What do you think it really would take for us to win that fifth match? See you, boys. I love the pod. I love the YouTube channel. I feel like I'm a fan of you guys, and most people my age, I'm in my 20s, they can't stand Alexi, but I love Alexi, Lalas, and I always will. See you, boys.
All right. So first off, did Patrick just say that most people in their 20s can't stand me?
That's been my experience as well, I have to say.
Well, I appreciate that at least I have Patrick and maybe some others out there. Great question, Patrick. I guess the easy answer is our Achilles heel is that we've never been there. We've never done that, okay? And certainly this group has never done that. I know we talk about 2002 and that rarefied era that we were in, but last World Cup when we went out to the Dutch, okay? It was not only visible that this was a better team, but this was a better team that recognized the moment that they were in and had the experience and the history to be able to do what needed to be done against, in this case, an inferior opponent in the form of the United States. So all of the experience that we often talk about here on the show and the new pathways and the level and the things that maybe haven't had in the past, that all has to come to bear in that moment. And even the experience of 4 years ago. If we get back to that same place where we are in the round of 16, potentially getting to a quarterfinal, a lot of those players that you saw 4 years ago are going to be there. And you have to hope that they will bring some of that experience. Now, if they get into a rarefied era where they've never been, okay, then you just kind of have to adjust in that moment. All right, now specifically, what's our Achilles heel? I've talked about it before. I think goalkeeping. We don't have a goalkeeper. Again, we go back to what Tim Howard did, even in a losing effort. So that could be we could play the most amazing knockout game, and we're controlling the ball, and we score some goals and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know whether it's Matt Freese or Matt Turner or anybody else. We let in a soft goal. Can you imagine how demoralizing that would be? Is if when all is said and done, and all the tactics and all the technique and all that kind of stuff, what let us down was goalkeeping. Oh, that would be heartbreaking. I worry about goalkeeping. What's our Achilles heel? And then I'll finish this with a much more general, big picture type of look. Because I was asked the other day, what advice would you give to players going into a World Cup? And I think I'm paraphrasing here, but I think I said, don't settle. And so I hope that this group comes into this World Cup and doesn't settle, in that the Achilles heel could be that they're satisfied and that this is enough. They get out of the group, they maybe win the round of 32. Don't lose the hunger of doing things. This goes back to what we talked about before, of doing things that people say you can't do or that haven't been done before. I don't know how you instill that, but when that final whistle blows, we're all going to have different types of regrets. But when that final whistle blows, don't come to the realization, oh, we deserved to be here, and we were better than what we did on the field, because you'll never get that back. Mosse.
I've mentioned this before. I do think in this effort to be more progressive, the U.S. has shed some of this blue-collar identity, and it's actually become a team that's less equipped to snatch a result against a more talented opponent than maybe some earlier iterations of the U.S. team. So if you run up against an Argentina and you try to play them straight up, I think that's a recipe for disaster. This last window was kind of illustrative of that. Mexico faced the same opponents as the U.S. And Stu Holden, the last time he was here, made a passing comment. He said he would flesh it out on a different day. He just assumed he's going to get more appearances on this pod.
Never assume.
He said, although he thinks the U.S. is better than Mexico, Mexico is more accepting of their limitations, which might serve them well.
Yep.
And in this last window, Mexico played Portugal to a 0-0 draw, Belgium to a 1-1 draw. We saw what happened with the U.S. against those teams. So I think that's an issue. When the U.S. faces a team that's clearly more talented than them, can this group of players kind of shift into more of a rugged, counterattacking, set pieces kind of approach?
That's such a I shouldn't be surprised, but a smart way of putting it. In this team right now, I do think is in this strange place, this purgatory, if you will, where we don't want to do what we did in the past, which was obviously a much more pragmatic, you could call it rudimentary way of playing, but it was effective. Now, it can only get you so far, and you can't go back to that well time and time again. And so there's the recognition that we have to evolve, and we have to mature, and we have to be better. And so when we see, the first 30 minutes against Portugal or others, oh, we're knocking it around and we're feeling good. You get this false sense of security. And I guess the perfect version of this U.S. team this summer would be melding those two together and being able at different moments to shift into it. When it's on, to be able to, I guess, be more romantic than we have been in the past without ever losing the fact that, you know what, you're going to have to muck it up at a certain point. And that's okay, because ultimately, especially in the United States, nobody gives a crap how you played. They care about winning, and they care about winners. And if you win, even if you win ugly, they will build statues to you.
That is it.
All right, let's take another quick break. We'll come back. We'll finish off the show with my one for the road. Okay, welcome back by the sight and sound of the van. You know, it's the end of our show. And at the end of each and every show, I give you my one for the road. Mosse, I'd like you to set this up because we come to find out over the last couple days here that FIFA is implementing some things for this World Cup that is fast approaching.
Yeah, some new rules regarding bookings at this summer's World Cup. First off, FIFA is expected to introduce new rules that could see red cards issued to players who cover their mouths in situations of confrontation with an opponent at the summer's World Cup. Now, we had an incident recently in a Benfica-Real Madrid Champions League match where the Benfica player Prestiani accused of racially abusing Vinicius Jr., and we couldn't tell for sure if he did or he didn't because he was covering his mouth, so they kind of want to prevent that. And then the other interesting change they made is to the yellow card accumulation. Single cards are going to clear twice during the tournament, once after the group stage and again after the quarterfinals. So it makes it really tough for a player to miss an important match due to yellow card accumulation.
David, I think you are the most amazing colleague that I have ever worked with in this industry, all right? You're a good-looking man, all right? And I am incredibly fortunate to work with you. Fuera! Out! Gone. Okay, so this is a situation where I understand, and I think we all understand what FIFA is trying to combat. Putting your hand over your mouth is, we see it every single game, and I don't think it's necessarily going to be used relative to when you want some privacy and the recognition that, you know, you're talking to a teammate or you're talking to somebody else, and you just don't want that private conversation being heard. But there also is an element of, in this case, a presumption of guilt, right? We all know it's not about identity, right? You know, like sometimes we talk about masks. That's about, well, who is this person? This isn't the case here when you're covering your mouth. We know who the person is that's saying it. And now you also have to decide, well, what is punishable? What is beyond the pale? F you piece of crap or whatever. And we know when it came to Vinny and others, it had a racial component, and it could have a sexual component, or any number of things. And we all, I think, recognize that we don't want that to happen. But it's kind of like you just have to be careful. Sometimes the question is, well, why don't you take the stand in defense in your own trial? Well, you have the right not to do that. And just because you are not saying something doesn't mean necessarily that you're guilty. So, like a lot of things, the devil's in the details. How are they ultimately going to use this? When are they ultimately going to use this? If it means that players aren't going to have that literal protection of saying things that are beyond the pale and should be punished and should not be acceptable, that's great. If it means that players don't feel comfortable now even interacting with each other, if it means that players are going to, do it and then be accused of something that they actually didn't, that would be problematic. The yellow card situation. So that's where FIFA is like, all right, I get what you're trying to do dealing with the problem. I think it's good, but I have no idea. The yellow card situation, I think, is absolutely brilliant. I love it. Nothing, I think, frustrates fans, players, everybody more than a player who is out because of yellow card accumulation. And the game has changed so rapidly. And I completely understand that we did not want to do anything that was going to encourage violent play and people breaking the laws of the game. I understand that. But, well, first off, in this World Cup, we've added yet another round. So there's another game. So there's another potential. I mean, I got a yellow card in 1994 for in front of 100,000 people not hearing the whistle and kicking the ball after the whistle. By the way, it was a wonderful shot that went in the upper 90. I should just add. But that was ridiculous. And so not having all of the talent to watch and to cheer and to celebrate because of yellow card accumulation, it always rubbed me the wrong way. And we were cheated oftentimes out of the best players and therefore the best teams at the World Cup. And I don't want that ever to happen. John Harkes, for example, missed the game against Brazil in 1994 because of yellow cards. And we know nowadays it's so easy to get a red card or get a yellow card. I know there's people that are going to say, well, it's so easy not to. Just don't break the law. And I understand that. But especially in a World Cup where you have referees from all different countries and therefore different cultures who see the game and referee the game in a different way, to be subject to that and to possibly miss out on a World Cup game because of yellow cards, it just, like I said, it just always irritated me. And so I'm glad that they are doing things to give you the best possible chance of being on the field. Doesn't apply to red cards. I'm not talking about that. And obviously violent play. We don't want any of that. But this is I think a smart and the right heading in the right direction for FIFA when it comes to this.
You mentioned John Harkes in 94. Brazil also benefited in the 2002 final against Germany. Michael Ballack missed that game due to suspension.
I remember that.
And that's what led to the yellow cards clearing after the quarterfinals rule to prevent anybody from missing the final due to suspension. And now, to your point, they've made it even tougher, which I think is the correct move. I'm very happy from a Casemiro perspective. my dad always says that the key to Brazil winning any tournament is surviving the inevitable Casemiro suspension game. In 2018, he was suspended for the quarterfinals against Belgium. Fernandinho had an absolute shocker. We lost 2-1. I think if Casemiro had played that game, we probably would have won. Might have won that whole World Cup. So, yeah, it does help players like him for sure.
But buyer beware now, all right? There should be no excuses anymore. Everybody understands, and the leeway has been given here. So if you are missing games, then you've messed up. Anything before we go, my friend, that you want to talk about?
I haven't finished yet, but I am off and running on that Prophet documentary, Cult, that you and Kat were talking about. Yes. I've seen 2 out of the 4 episodes, so when I'm done with that, I will have my review.
You were good. Only thing I have is Apex over there on Netflix. It stars Charlize Theron. It's this weird. It's like Deliverance or The Most Dangerous Game or Logan's Run or Running Man. Where the humans are hunted. And she's out in the outback of Australia, not the outback, but I don't know. It's definitely in Australia. I don't know if it's the outback, but the wilds of Australia. And this guy ends up hunting her. And without Charlize Theron, it would be even worse. But you get to see Charlize Theron run around and jump off rocks and kayak and do all sorts of things. It ends up being pretty boring and predictable. It doesn't even come close to some of the other movies that are about the human hunt that I mentioned over there. So completely avoidable as far as I'm concerned. Anything before we go?
That is it.
That's it. All right. Well, listen, enjoy your soccer on and off the field. Enjoy your rest of your week. Keep downloading and reviewing and subscribing and rating and smashing that button left and right, up and down, double fisting over there on YouTube. We heard our caller today talk about YouTube, so people dig the YouTube out there. And to all my 20-somethings out there that are actually listening and watching, I thank you, if there are any out there. I hope that there's some of them out there. And you know what? You'll come around. You just need to mature a little bit. We'll talk to you again next week. And until then, And as always, my friends, size the day.